Principles of morality are often reflected upon in Better Call Saul, and oftentimes characters' morals are not only shown through interactions with one another, but rather visually. If a character's morals are in question or even compromised, not only will we see this through a character's actions, but also through something as simple as an ice cream cone. But visual storytelling isn't the reason I'm making this video. There are already countless phenomenal videos showing Gilligan and Gould's true genius when it comes to visual storytelling in Better Call Saul, so instead, I'd like to discuss Better Call Saul's characters. In particular, the character of Howard Hamlin. Who is Howard Hamlin? Well, this is Howard Hamlin. Initially, Howard is first presented as a foil to the show's main protagonist, and even in the very first scene with Howard, he's seen arguing with the show's main character, Jimmy McGill. And most of his scenes in Season 1 portray him as a sort of villain of Better Call Saul. Over the course of Season 1, Howard is built up as the show's main antagonist, or at least the main antagonist of Jimmy McGill.
Because I don't care.
Take this scene from Season 1, Episode 8. We see a younger Jimmy who for 5 long years worked his way to obtaining a law degree from the show's University of American Samoa. He failed his bar exam twice, but eventually succeeded on his third attempt, officially allowing him to become a lawyer. And the first thing he does after learning that he passed the bar exam was asking his brother Chuck McGill for a job at his law firm HHM. Jimmy's brother Chuck appears to be proud of his hardworking brother. He pretty much guarantees to Jimmy and the audience that he'd be hired as a lawyer. The very next scene, we see Jimmy celebrating his recent success. Then in comes Howard Hamlin to reveal whether or not he'd be hired at HHM. The conversation is inaudible. However, through Jimmy's body language and overall reaction, we can tell that it wasn't good news and that he wouldn't hire Jimmy. And this is one of the driving factors that early on convinces the audience to root against Howard. In the very next episode, after Chuck and Jimmy had spent countless hours building a multi-million-dollar case, they needed HHM's help. So Jimmy and Chuck set up a meeting with the firm to discuss details, and all seems to be going well. Jimmy is guaranteed 20% of the case's final settlement money and even a $20,000 bonus for his previous work on the case. However, when Jimmy asks what office he would get in order to continue his work on the case, the tone of the scene shifts. Howard's demeanor changes from his usual calm and collected self to a more professional look. We see Jimmy tense up, looking not only confused, but frustrated. Howard takes the room for himself, and he explains that although HHM was the case, they don't want Jimmy. Howard continues to reinforce his and the firm's stance that Jimmy would not be hired, and Jimmy is clearly upset.
You are.
Once again, Howard is made out to be the villain. He refused to hire Jimmy when he first got his law degree, and now, after Jimmy is basically gifting a multi-million-dollar case to Howard's firm, he still denies him and gives him no explanation as to why. However, it wasn't Howard who refused Jimmy. He was simply taking the blame for it. In fact, Howard was thoroughly impressed with Jimmy's work ethic, and later, he was even more blown away by Jimmy's drive and skills as a lawyer. In Season 1 of Episode 9, it's revealed to the audience that it was actually Jimmy's brother Chuck who didn't want to hire Jimmy. Howard simply took the blame for not hiring Jimmy, as was Chuck's request for him. We do see Howard and Jimmy apologize to one another for their actions, and it seems they're mostly on good terms. Howard compliments Jimmy's work ethic, and Jimmy apologizes for the line. All seems to be well between the two. In fact, in Season 2, Howard strongly pushed for another firm, Cliff Maine, to hire Jimmy as a partner, and he got it. And sure, Jimmy deserves the job for his work on the Sandpiper case, but without Howard, he never would have gotten the job. So for the most part, Jimmy gets his dream partner job as a direct result of Howard's recommendation, and the illustrious title of lawyer was now Jimmy McGill's to claim. He had an office, an apartment, a company car, and even a custom desk. He'd finally attained a level of success similar to his brother's, and maybe even made his brother proud, something he'd been trying to do his whole life. He'd finally become and gotten everything he wanted. Jimmy McGill had become a real lawyer, and Howard Hamlin was a huge reason for it. But as Jimmy spends more time as a real lawyer, he begins to realize that this isn't what he wants. The life that he's been chasing for so long simply isn't for him. He doesn't fit in, and it's not what he wants anymore. He originally plans on quitting, and he almost goes through with it, already having his letter of resignation ready. However, he learns that if he quits, he won't get to keep his $25,000 signing bonus, but if he's fired, he will. So Jimmy slips into Saul Goodman and develops an elaborate scheme to get himself fired. He wears obnoxious clothes to the office in order to stick out, he buys a blender to distract the rest of the office, and he ruins someone's suit. He even tries his hand at learning the bagpipes. Eventually, after all of his chicanery, he finally manages to get himself fired, and this is a big win for Jimmy. He'd successfully gotten himself fired and was able to keep his signing bonus. Sure, he had to ruin a few people's opinions of him and likely cost Cliff Maine some clients, but Saul succeeded. He won. However, this is where a common cycle of Saul's nature presents itself. Sure, he achieved his short-term goal of getting himself fired, but the long-term effects of his antics had only just begun. Remember, Howard was the one who recommended Jimmy for the job, and through Jimmy's childish antics to get himself fired, he not only embarrassed embarrassed Howard, but he also damaged his reputation, and Howard is justifiably furious. He takes his anger out on Jimmy's soon-to-be wife and good friend Kim Wexler, who had already been stuck in doc review, essentially career purgatory. See, while Howard had pushed for Jimmy to sign with Cliff Main, Kim was the one who pushed Howard to recommend Jimmy. So yes, Howard had Jimmy to blame for messing it up, but he also had Kim to blame for pushing so hard. Although Kim had a plan to get out, she worked endlessly to obtain a big client for HHM in Mesa Verde and brought it to Howard. Kim fully expected to get her old position back and continue her work for Mesa Verde, but Howard kept her in doc review. And yeah, this eventually leads to Kim leaving HHM, but it leads to more than that. See, HHM had put Kim through law school and gave her a job. She felt she owed a lot to Howard and HHM and kept that feeling through the early seasons of Better Call Saul. But the decision by Howard to keep her in doc review is one of the first times we see Kim start to truly hate Howard. And although she's still grateful for what he's done for her, this is the beginning of Kim's deep hatred for Howard Hamlin. Throughout season 3, we see Chuck's mental health slowly deteriorate. We see him more paranoid than ever, and it even seems his legal mind isn't what it used to be. Howard, who is a good friend of Chuck and partners with him at HHM, suggests that maybe Chuck should consider retiring, but Chuck freaks out and threatens to sue the firm. His incessant pride and need to be in control won't allow him to even consider retirement. However, rather than go through a lengthy lawsuit that would embarrass the firm, Chuck and Howard managed to reach an agreement of which 3 payments would be made to Chuck for his time and overall work he'd committed to the firm. While HHM doesn't have the money to pay Chuck, Howard does, and rather than watching hundreds of people lose their jobs and the firm collapse, Howard pays Chuck out of his own pocket. In this scene, we can see Chuck has betrayed Howard professionally, but he's also betrayed their friendship, something that was very important to Howard. We see his obvious feeling of betrayal, but also a deep sadness resonating throughout him. We notice his lips quiver and his eyes teary. He desperately tries to salvage what little's left of this once great friendship with Chuck, but he realizes that it's ultimately pointless. He simply hands Chuck the first payment and tells him that,
You won.
As Chuck is forced out of the firm, we see his health deteriorate even further. Without the law, he lacks purpose, and without purpose, he lacks any compassion or meaning in life. And this is most present in his final conversation with Jimmy. In this final conversation, he explains to Jimmy that
You've never mattered all that much to me.
and Chuck cements the idea that no matter what, he'll always be a screw-up. We see him destroy any trace of electricity and current in his house as well, and this is all because of his mental issues. And finally, we see a hollowed and already dead version of Chuck who denounced his brother and destroyed his house, set himself on fire. After this scene, we see Howard meet with Kim and Jimmy, and we see that he admits that he blames himself for Chuck's death. He believes that if he hadn't forced him out of HHM, then Chuck would still be alive. Howard truly believed that he was the cause of Chuck's death, and throughout season 5, we see him suffering through depression and insomnia because of it, and it takes him over a season to get past this guilt that's been ruining him. But eventually, he's able to move past it, and he even wants to fix all the wrong he's done. And in order to heal old wounds, Howard finally offers Jimmy a job, something that he'd wanted for so long. But this goes, well, not great. At this point in the series, Jimmy is no longer Jimmy. He's almost fully transformed into Saul. He's already a cartel lawyer, he pulls schemes for all of his clients, and most of all, his perception of right and wrong are essentially gone at this point. Any and everything is about the money with Saul, and any sense of actual justice is nearly gone. Jimmy is Saul. Jimmy's wants and desires are pretty much gone. Anything Jimmy may have wanted in the past, he sees as irrelevant now. So when Howard offers Saul a job at HHM, not only is he not interested, but he's actually offended by it. So much so that he destroys Howard's car with a bowling ball, and this is a catalyst for something so much worse. Towards the end of season 5, Howard follows up with Saul on the job offer. However, Jimmy freaks out, and we learn that he blames Howard for the death of his brother. We learn both Jimmy and Saul not only hate Howard, but they despise him. Jimmy blames Howard for the death of his brother, and Saul is offended by such a meaningless job offer. He so delicately tells Howard that
Too small!
as he's already making thousands of dollars as a friend of the cartel. Jimmy goes off. All of his built-up anger and rage from his past with Howard finally comes out. While Jimmy is letting out all of his anger and rage, we see Howard simply walks away from it. He takes the high road. He was able to move past his guilt, his depression, and his feeling that he killed Chuck. He was able to move past it all, and as Saul boasts about his superiority to Howard, we see Howard has moved on. We see Howard's become a better man while Jimmy is stuck in the past. We see Jimmy is hurt by the fact that Howard was able to move on from Chuck, as he still blames Howard for the death of Chuck. The job offer, although offered with good intent, is ultimately far too late to be anything more than an insult, at least to Jimmy, and this is his final straw. This is the moment where Jimmy McGill and Saul Goodman's hatred for Howard set him over the edge. In this moment and every moment after, Saul is agreeing to the later plot to destroy Howard's life and career. Although the scheme hasn't even been brought up yet, this is the moment that Saul Goodman killed Howard Hamlin. But what about Kim? Well, Howard and Kim have a talk. Throughout their talk, Howard insinuates that Kim isn't as strong and independent as she thinks. He mentions Jimmy destroying his car and his talk with Jimmy. He tells Kim that dropping Mesa Verde makes no sense, and rather than accepting that it was Kim's decision to let them go, he says that Jimmy must have had something to do with her decision. And yes, Howard is definitely insulting to Kim here, whether that was his intent or not. But Kim's reaction is even worse. In earlier season, Kim would have been shocked and downright disgusted with Jimmy's actions. In fact, she likely would have cut him off for something that bad. Now, after years of their slow corruption, Kim simply responds with a laugh. And from this talk, we understand that the one character who used to be somewhat of a moral compass for Jimmy and his actions is now gone. Kim is done putting up with Howard, and this is her moment. This is the moment that Kim Wexler decides to kill Howard. At this point, Kim and Jimmy are so disconnected from what's right and wrong that they're both willingly helping the cartel. They're both okay with the thought that Lalo, the cartel member they're helping, will be killed. Two characters used to try and do the right thing now trick and steal from innocent people simply because they find it fun. And their worst scheme of all led to Howard's death. At this point in the series, Saul and Kim hate Howard, and over the course of the first half of season 6, we see their plan to jeopardize Howard's career. We see one piece of their sinister plot unfold at a time, but we never know exactly what they're planning. We know it'll ruin Howard, but we just don't know what. Not yet. But while Saul and Kim plan to ruin Howard, we also see something else. We start to see Howard on a more personal level. We see his marriage issues at home. We see him struggling to keep his firm afloat. We see him missing his good friend Chuck. We see him try everything in his power to squash Saul and Kim's plot, even going as far as to punch it out with Jimmy. We begin to truly see Howard, not necessarily as a good man, but at the very least a decent one. A man undeserving of his future fate. And as we slowly see Kim and Saul's plan unfold, we understand their main objective is to ruin Howard's career, to ruin his credibility. They justify their scheme with the sandpiper settlement money they'd received, but really, it was never about that. Both Kim and Jimmy have lost almost any sliver of humanity that they used to have, and if it really was about the sandpiper money, they would have just waited. As their scheme unfolds, we see Saul and Kim paint Howard as a cocaine addict, as a man who throws prostitutes out of his car, as a paranoid addict blaming an innocent man for a scheme that he had nothing to do with. But worst of all, we see why Kim and Saul really ruined Howard, not because of their hate, not because of money, but simply because they enjoyed ruining Howard, because they thought it was fun, because they simply got off on it. And after they've successfully ruined Howard and his reputation, the true consequences of their scheme are revealed. We hear a knock on Saul and Kim's door. In steps Howard looking for answers as to why his career and reputation have been ruined. Why him? What did he do to deserve any of it? What could have possibly made Kim and Saul so hellbent on destroying Howard? Then Howard realizes that Saul and Kim are simply soulless. He realizes that he didn't deserve to be ruined. He was just a victim of their fun. The scene tenses. The camera darkens. The camera focuses on Howard. You get the feeling something bad is about to happen, but you don't know what. We see Saul and Kim's candle flicker the same way it did when Howard entered, only this time, it wasn't Howard. Jimmy rushes to protect Kim as a haunting score accompanies a camera that still hasn't revealed who's entered the room. Howard continues his rant, unaware of the danger behind him. Then we cut to Howard with a blurred figure behind him. We know who it is, but Howard is still unaware. It's not until Howard turns around that we see Lalo Salamanca in full detail, as if he's revealed through Howard's eyes. We see Lalo slowly pull out his pistol as Kim and Jimmy beg Howard to leave. Camera focuses on Howard. The music stops. Lalo raises his pistol, and Howard is shot dead. This is the true consequence of Saul and Kim's plot. Not Howard's career being ruined, not his reputation being destroyed, but his death. Howard was in that apartment because of Saul and Kim, because of their scheme. Lalo was in that apartment because of Saul and Kim, because of their cartel ties. Both Lalo and Howard were in that apartment because of Saul and Kim, because of their corruption, because of their greed, because of their immorality. Howard is dead because of Saul and Kim, and so is his legacy. After his death, Saul and Kim continue the story that Howard was an addict. His actual death is covered up with a tragic story, painting Howard's death as an addict who just walked himself into the ocean, and that's all he'll be remembered for. His body is dropped in a hole below a meth lab, and any friends and family that used to know Howard now know him as an addict, as someone who needed help, as someone who threw hookers out of his car. Saul and Kim had won. Howard was ruined. A completely undeserved fate met with an even more tragic tarnish of his legacy cemented Howard as Better Call Saul's most tragic character. This isn't all to say that Howard is perfect. He definitely wasn't a villain and he didn't deserve to die, but he certainly wasn't a hero. He was never a protagonist, and most of the time he can even be a grade A asshole. He acts above others and he treats people inferior, but most of the time Howard is decent, maybe even good. He's a perfectly moral character in a perfectly immoral world. He's not a bad guy, he's not a hero, he's just decent. And decent is better than most. Howard Hamlin is truly Better Call Saul's most tragic character. Thank you guys for watching. My analytics tell me that 95% of my viewers aren't subscribed, so consider liking and subscribing if you enjoyed. I really loved making this video, so if you guys are interested, I'd love to make more Better Call Saul videos in the future. As always, thank you guys so much for supporting me, and consider checking out my other content. Peace.